For some reason I kept putting off watching Empress of Mars. Well, I do know the exact reason, so that turn of phrase doesn't work. For an exact reason I kept putting off watching Empress of Mars. Namely, it's the Mark Gatiss episode. They happen every year, are never anything new, and I feel like I've made this video 50 billion fucking times already. And he's writing the Ice Warriors again. Oh! Joy! Look, I like the Ice Warriors, yes, but do we have to have the same writer dealing with the same classic Who monster again? I mean, yeah, it was probably Mark's idea to do the Ice Warriors again, but couldn't we have had a different writer offer their own spin on them, maybe? Oh yeah, and the obvious reason I put this off, I'm a big fan of League of Gentlemen, and it's always incredibly difficult to shit on his work because he seems like a genuinely nice guy, and it makes me feel like a bit of a douchebag having to do it again and again year after year. So before I started out, I was struggling to see much in the way of a point of Empress of Mars. Essentially it just sounded like a base under siege story with the Ice Warriors in it again. And that's pretty much what it is. I mean, yes, it's kind of steampunky, you know, soldiers of the British Empire going out to colonise Mars. You know, that's a bit of an interestingly daft idea, but it is a typical Mark Gatiss idea, and I know he's writing far too well at this point, so I'm never surprised by anything he does in the Whoniverse, and I usually find the result pretty flat and unengaging, to be honest. Okay, take this scene here. Okay, there's only one fairly docile Ice Warrior left, apparently. Then they discover the tomb of a mummified Ice Queen, and we got this caricature of a British Empire soldier doing something out of self-interest, which is obviously going to restore the Ice Queen to life and initiate our conflict because, ooh, story beat. And now the sort of jumpy, nervy character's just wandered in looking for his friend who's just been killed off, and there's going to be the reveal of the villain of the episode and a climactic chord's going to sound. Bwam. I am the monster of the week. You will all die. Have I just been watching too long? Because almost everything that happens in Empress of Mars I saw coming. The story beats are so familiar that I can practically sing them by this point. In fact... No, I'm not going to sing. Fuck that shit. Okay, I saw this comment a while back. I apologise for not citing this properly, but I get so many these days it's hard to keep track, and I don't really agree with this perspective, so I'm not claiming this idea as my own. The comment suggested that Doctor Who is essentially soap opera of a sci-fi flavour by this point when you break it down into formulas. While the show's all about change and moving with the times, a show as ever-present as Doctor Who has its formulas that it retreads all the time, and a lot of episodes of it are going to be made with the fact that people do dip in and out of it and don't catch every episode in mind. In the same way that people dip in and out of soap operas, how many viewers actually are going to be like me, avid classic and new Who nerds who've seen most of it? Empress of Mars might seem fresh and original if you haven't seen Doctor Who do this sort of thing 1,000 fucking times before like I have. I'm sure a lot of viewers of New Who are like this, who just watch the odd episode or two here and there. Just like with soaps, the characters are swapped out all the time, but the same basic story elements are usually there to achieve the desired effect. And while I don't totally agree with that assessment of Doctor Who as the sci-fi equivalent of EastEnders in terms of the way that it executes its formulas in a cyclical way, I mean, the show can be very forward-thinking and incredibly imaginative, and its moments of ingenuity, experimentation, and real-world commentary like Heaven Sent, Smile and Vincent and the Doctor are what keep me watching. However, Empress of Mars kinda totally plays into the hands of this theory that Doctor Who essentially exists to rehash the same story in knowledge that new people will be channel hopping and land on this one evening and hopefully won't switch over because it's Doctor Who. It's not there to be artistic and forward thinking, it's there to fulfill its function. Just provide the viewer with a pulpy retro sci-fi throwback that's just a bit of mindless fun and nothing more, really. And that's not a slight on Mark. The guy's been writing this stuff for God knows how long now. He knows what he's doing behind a word processor, but I just can't help getting the feeling that I'm not the intended recipient of a Mark Gatiss episode by this stage in the game, which is why I found this one very flat and very unengaging, based on the context that I went into the episode with. But Stuart, you're being unfair. The show's been around for 54 years. How can anything feel fresh and new after all that time? Heaven Sent was only 2 years ago. Have you forgotten that? The franchise was 40 years old by the time that Scherzo came out. There's a lot more going on in Smile than most people admit. Thinking outside the box isn't impossible, you know, and Empress of Mars barely does that. If at all. I mean, I like simple but effective ideas, but Empress of Mars is almost painfully simple. We got these caricatures of British generals essentially invading Mars, having a massive shouting match with the natives, and eventually learning that they have to cooperate with their opponents in order to survive. I mean, it's got a positive message overall, I guess, but what else has it got besides that? And given just how one-dimensional and cartoonish the British Empire soldiers were, as they kept delivering their lines related to the message of cooperation, which basically just iterate the same point over and over again over the course of the second half of the episode, and I just kept thinking, yeah, I get it already. Cooperation is good. What else you got? It doesn't really do that much with the Ice Warriors mythos either, and I've seen them done a lot better than this. I really enjoyed this Big Finish story that they put out a little while back called Lords of the Red Planet, which fully fleshed out this rich and interesting culture and backstory for the Ice Warriors. It's easily my favourite Ice Warriors story, and that's probably part of why I'm being so hard on this one. Lords of the Red Planet is a fucking epic, whereas this one is just, well, not very, you know, deep. I mean, I didn't expect anything deep from Mark by this point, but the entire raison d'etre of this episode is supposed to be two sides understanding one another. But given Mark's a caricaturist first and foremost, it's just not really the sort of thing he's suited to. So any messages he's trying to get across are surface level and pretty one-dimensional. It would have been nice if we'd spent a bit more time around the Ice Warriors, gotten to know them and the history of their planet. The whole thing about Man Friday supposedly being the last of his kind just felt a bit token. It was just sort of thrown out there and left alone for most of the runtime. We didn't really spend much time with him. I didn't feel anything for him. Oh, and I also would have liked it if we'd spent a little bit of time out on the surface of Mars. Really get a feel for how desolate the landscape is now that the Ice Warriors have all but died out. I don't mean to be as harsh as I sound here, but it always bugs me when I see an episode skip over stuff that I haven't seen the show do before, for the sake of spending the bulk of the runtime doing the same things that New Who does all the bloody time. So yeah, overall, Empress of Mars was alright, sorta, but ultimately kinda pointless. Not terrible or anything, but pointless. In fact, the only reason I'm bothering making this video about it at all is that it does a tiny thing that's given me a talking point for this video's edition of Prediction Corner, the section of He Who Moans where I try and predict what will happen in future episodes. Okay, since now, 3 years after I joked about it, we've actually seen the return of minor character from the Peladon stories, Alpha Centauri, and also this season we've seen the fucking Movellans of all characters, it's clear that they're starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel for characters from Classic Who that they could bring back and call a big deal when they still haven't fucking done the Valyard or Omega for some reason. I predict that Chibnall's first series on the show is going to see an even further scraping of the bottom of the barrel, and we'll see the return of the Cryons from Attack of the Cybermen, the Dravins from Galaxy 4, the Big Robot from Robot, the people from the Sunmakers, the things from Nightmare of Eden, whatever this is, this bit of floor from Timelash, carrot juice. Oh, and the weird freaky soldier things from the Mind Robber. Actually, thinking about it, I would love the shit out of that last one. Mind Robber, get on it, Chibbers.